Let's continue rebuilding our project by looking at only the dots in the timeline. So the timeline essentially is a series of lines on a spreadsheet that allow you to put dots on this timeline area here. And this timeline is defined in the settings menu in terms of its span. In this case, 1740 to 1830, which is Jefferson's life, which works out just fine for us. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over the spreadsheet and we'll say, let's put the first one in, say he was born. Okay, let's go back to the spreadsheet here and we're going to put in some things. So basically we're going to be looking at the first few of these rows for each line. Each one of these lines is going to represent a dot, right? All right, so I'm going to put in a dot. We'll call it a dot. We're going to start at 1743 because that's when he was born, and there's no end. This is what's going to show up in the timeline, and we'll say Jefferson was born, and this is what will show up in the pop-up. Okay, and then we could set a color. Let's make it red. And we don't actually have to set anything else for it to start out. So let's see what it looks like. We'll go back to the spreadsheet and refresh it. And we've got our first dot. Okay, so our first dot is at 1743. We can see, and we click on it. We get Jefferson was born. Pretty straightforward. Okay, now really what I want to do is actually have a picture in there with it. So let's make that a little more interesting. So go back to the spreadsheet and I'm going to cut and paste a picture. And this is a fully formed URL of the picture that we're looking to see. And if I click on it, you'll be able to, you see, there it is, a picture of his house in Shadwell. So, and now if I go back here, and remember, I click out of the spreadsheet, and that'll cause it to be saved on the drive. If I left this in here as I was editing it, it only saves it when I go out of it. So in order to see the results of what you've done, you have to actually click out of it. So we'll go here and go back, and I can also hit Alt-R to refresh things. Okay, now when I click on born, now we've got a picture in there. And so it's a more robust pop-up. So rather than boring you with the details of putting in the other dots, I'm going to cut and paste them from the other demo. Okay, I've cut it out and I put it here and I paste it. So edit, paste special, and I'll just do the values. Okay, so now I've got a whole series of dots, and let's see what this looks like. Hit Alt-R to refresh the screen. Okay, I've copied the dots from the other demo, and I click over here, and I'll edit and paste them special because I just want the values only. And there it is. So now I've got all the dots in there from beginning to end. And the difference, the only real difference here is that some of them have an end date, which show because he was at William and Mary for 2 years, he was president, for 9 years, etc. And also I've changed the marker. You can basically put in a variety of different things: dots, squares, bars. If you check out the manual, you can see what that looks like. So now let's see visualize thing. I hit Alt-R, and now we've got all the same dots up there, and they have all the pictures, and it's basically the same. And we effectively completed our timeline. Now the only other thing I want to do here is I want to talk about segments. So one of the things I might want to do is divide up Jefferson's time into a series of segments. So these segments will define periods in his life and scale the timeline appropriately. So the first segment would be we type in marker as a segment, and now it's we're going to go from 1743 to 1763 and call this the colonial era. And we'll make this the only other thing, we'll make it gray. Okay, now I'm going to cut the other ones from the other one. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to say whenever I click on one of those segments, it's going to show only the area from 1743 to 1763. And let me pull the other ones here from the other spreadsheet. I'm just paste them in just so I don't have to type them. Okay, same thing. So I'm going to cut and paste the segment and copy them down. So I've got 5 segments. 4 define the eras, and the final one, which doesn't have a date associated with it, is going to be the one that shows them all again. So now let's see what this looks like. Okay, so now we got our 4 things on there and that. So the colonial era now just shows me things from 1743 to 1763. The Revolutionary era, etc., and show all shows everything. So that's pretty much it about the timeline. There isn't a whole lot of other things you can do here. One thing I didn't really talk about is the position thing. That shows how high the dot is on the timeline. Now we don't have to, I basically had them go up and down, but I think if you just take them out, you'll get a relatively decent looking timeline too. So let's look at that. Alt-R to refresh. Yeah, so now it basically goes up and wraps around. But you can control how far you want them. So this is the first dot on the timeline, number 1, 2, 3, 4. And the timeline shows those things. So that's the timeline, and we'll next step is we'll go to the map and show what we can do with things on the map.